Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Regular Board Meeting for February 27th, 2025. It's 1:03 p.m. I would like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the traditional territories of the Shishal and Squamish Nations. Directors, we do have an agenda in front of us today. I believe Director Gabius has one item to add to this agenda.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like under new business to add a notice of motion regarding the response to U.S. tariffs.
All right, directors, is there anything else to add or adjust on this agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to adopt as amended. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. First up, we have the regular board meeting minutes, item 3.1 for February 13th, 2025. This is on page 3. Directors, are there any errors or omissions in those minutes before we move to adopt? If not, I'd look for a motion to adopt, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, is there any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business that directors would like to discuss? Director Bax. Microphone, sir.
Sorry. In the minutes on page, let me find the page. Page 9. I need some more information on this Community Emergency Preparedness Grant for emergency support services equipment training valued at $30,000. I was wondering if I could get some information as to whether that has been completely dispersed and how it's been dispersed, because I'm looking to find some funding for a community group that's creating some emergency response activities within my area.
That was not the purpose of this grant. This was very specifically for emergency services equipment for the regional district. Like, this is a pre-approved funding package.
Well, that's the information I wanted on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bax. Directors, any other business arising? No? Okay. With that, we're going to move on to item 5.1, which is a presentation slash delegation from Dr. Chris Hergesheimer and Mary Karros from the Sunshine Coast Resource Center. So come on up and the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, directors. Thank you very much for having us here. Excellent. I tend to over-project sometimes, so I was going on the side of less optimistic there. But good afternoon, directors. Thank you for having us here. This is Mary Karros, the Executive Director of the Sunshine Coast Resource Center, and I'm Chris Hergesheimer, and I am the manager of the Community Development and Poverty Reduction Program, which we instituted this fall after years of UBCM-funded poverty reduction projects that we saw a great need to turn it into a full program. So we're very excited about that and to carry on with these integrated initiatives. So today we're here to talk about a report that we released it was in November, called Get Moving, and it was really around the critical need for transportation for seniors specific on the coast. And I want to preface all this by saying we made a methodological decision with this report to try something different rather than quantitative numbers and ridership numbers and things like that. We really wanted to highlight stories. In a lot of the work we do in community development and poverty reduction work, we highlight the stories of individuals with lived and living experience to be levers in a different way to address people's feelings. And the amount of stories that seniors across this region told us were very moving, were very, very compelling, and oftentimes could not be captured in numerical data. And so we're very pleased that we made a methodological shift. We don't know what this will mean, what kind of action it will inspire, but we knew that we had to add an extra methodological move to try to inspire some action around this critical need. So here we are, Sunshine Coast, Sechelt, Swaya, as well as the Squamish Nation, grateful to be here, and all of our activities and operations happening within these ancestral and unceded lands. So a lot of this information might not come as a surprise to you at all. The Sunshine Coast has one of the highest seniors populations in BC, and recent stats expected to grow to 56% of all residents by 2026. 12.3% of the population live in a transportation desert with no fixed link public transit, and 7.8% in the Half Moon Bay area do receive limited transit hours and frequency. And the Sunshine Coast is largely a car-centric region, with the vast majority of trips being made by personal vehicles, followed surprisingly by walking or biking, probably in those denser urban centers, and then transit at only 4%. And I'll highlight that the car-centric language often leads us to think that this is somehow inevitable. There's a new term that's catching on in the early sociological circles, and it's about modonormative, where we have these unconscious biases about the way in which cars and personal vehicles have come to dominate our space and our lives. And so I think that using the terminology there, we could say car-centric, or we are living in a modonormative age where solutions and alternatives do need to be challenged in that regard. So for a small region, we do have a fair amount of mixed transportation, and that's what our sort of environmental scan, there's private vehicles, Handy Dart, coastal rides, taxi service, Coast Connector, Care for a Lift, all kinds of active transportation. So it's not to say that we have nothing, and some regions with populations around this province have way less than we do in terms of transportation services. But adequate, affordable, accessible, and safe transportation options are critical to seniors' social participation and health, and they are essential to building resilient communities. So to understand how we move in terms of how we are in community, what we eat, where we live, like at very, very fundamental levels, these are the building blocks of what it means to live in a thriving community, to live in a resilient community. And when we ask what are the links between how we move, how we spend time with one another, and what our built environment looks like, and how easy it is to participate in society, this continually comes up as an important issue worthy of discussion. So we also recognize that seniors' transportation issues cannot be siloed off, that they are part of a larger transportation system and they're part of larger systems thinking. And when you go to that level of complexity, you end up with things like this, which was the result of our transportation convening back in May of last year, where we brought partners together and they produced visual graphics and documents that really look at the complexity of the system's work. And so when we situate seniors' transportation within that systems approach, collaboration becomes more important than ever. So to identify these transportation challenges, one interesting thing that came out of this report is that youth often face a very, very similar set of challenges as seniors when it comes to transportation, often have similar needs for public transit, the wanting to go and mobilize and meet up with their friends, and are sometimes restricted. We have brought together actors with a responsibility for different parts of the system, and then connecting that to what we know in the literature rather than simply recreating more studies after studies. We need to be building on what we already know and then bringing it to a context on the Sunshine Coast. So this slide is, I'm not going to read it all, but it's just to point out that we feel we've done an incredible amount of collaborative work over the last couple of years with the Seniors Transportation Working Group, The assessment and action plan, which resulted in this Get Moving with the Who Cares project, Deer Crossing, a very unlikely ally to do something like this, but proved to be extremely valuable in making those connections. Pender Harbor Health Center with their new bus that they're running, and I can attest to seeing seniors coming, accessing the food bank in Seashell and shopping and then heading back seems to be working very, very well. The transportation convening, bringing together those people and recognizing just how valuable and how they all hold pieces of the puzzle. And then Mary and Sally McBride were able to go and present at the Advancing Transportation in Rural and Small Towns. That was in the provincial summit back in November. So when we look ahead, this report talked about it methodologically. The stories are very, very powerful to say, yes, there's a bus, it's 500 meters from my house, it's down a gravel road, and the bus stop is uncovered along the side of the highway does not mean that you have accessible access or equitable access to a bus. And Paul in Middle Point, having 3 or 4 friends, none of whom drive and who are cut off from what they might like to be doing in their late 50s, early 60s. These stories are very powerful, and we want to try to lean on those as we look at levers for change. Of course, the Seniors Link bus that we already mentioned, these are things that have come out of this work over the last couple of years, which we're proud of, and to keep this on the agenda. So the final slide of my presentation, really, we did call the report Get Moving in a cheeky title to say that we need to take some action on this. We understand that this is a very complex issue, but it affects so many other areas of life. And with that growing seniors population on the coast, we understand not only that there needs to be extra emphasis placed in that, but that working in a silo on seniors transportation alone will not get us where we need to be. The Seniors Transportation Working Group has now evolved to the point where it is a coast-wide seniors transportation group convening, and we're really looking to build out the case and a model for funding some kind of regional transportation role to pull all these strings, to get everyone facing the same direction and coordinate those conversations, very similar to what happened from the Housing Action Table leading to the Cover the Coast and Kelly Foley's role, but a similar model to that of saying there's a lot of diverse threads out there and there's a lot of overlap between these initiatives, and we would love to see a role where someone can begin to convene those conversations, push them forward, take very measurable actions, and find the supporting community. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. I think I can stop your screen share from here, can't I? Oh, perfect. Directors, any questions? Director Inkster.
Thanks, Chris, and your group for this report. A couple of things I was interested in, and I'll just do some research on it. The early part you said about people's sounds habitual, how they drive, that particular sociological theory that you mentioned, that I'm going to have to do further research on my own. But I want to talk to your report. The parts you mentioned in it about availability of transportation and what people use, I'm just wondering if some of it's safety and convenience as to why they choose vehicle over others. In Seashell, we've tried to light and sidewalk a lot of the community, spent a lot of money on it, and that's to encourage people to use that motor method and or go to transit options. So that's sort of what I'm talking to you about, trying to figure out what we can do. 4% on transit is interesting. I was just on the bus last week, and I am every few weeks. There was a lot of people going both ways down the corridor, full, to back from Gibson's, and so that was interesting, but it was mainly younger people. I see older more in Vancouver. So I'm just trying to ask you, you know, you're going to do more research, I'm assuming, but what do we do? 4% seems low for transit. And how do we get people walking more? Is it too cold? Is it too wet? Right?
Yeah. I'll just qualify that 4%. That came from provincial statistics, and there's about an 18-month data lag on that. So that was from 2022, was the most up-to-date we had at provincial level around this region. We didn't conduct that original research ourselves. So we expect that ridership has probably increased in our region in addition as a result of the free transit for youth. Just plug that. We know that there's been more uptake, so I would think that that number is certainly rising. And when you speak to the way we change our built environment in Sechelt with lit sidewalks and stuff, Sechelt has incredible opportunity being flat and in that to really encourage and lean into that more active transportation and walking. So I think, what do? You know, we have plans, we have a transit master plan, we have these things that are coming. For us, it's to try to understand what are the small connections that we as a community have more control over, and that we can begin to do both at the grassroots level and at the policy level at this point. So we're here for information only about this state and to highlight the seniors piece of things, but there is more work to be done saying, what does a multi-pronged strategy look like at the grassroots level, at the programmatic level for nonprofits, and then at the policy level, both regionally and provincially and even federally?
Great, thank you. Director Bax?
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the work that's being done. I sit in on the Seniors Transportation Work Group, and I understand that the Partners in Change group has given a grant to try to, that this group is going to be using to explore creating a role for a Sunshine Coast Transportation Coordinator. I'm very keen on seeing someone in that role that can liaise with the various different levels of government. Now that we have a new Ministry of Transportation and Transit, I wonder if they are involved in anything. And I wonder if there's anything within this work that you're doing that would qualify for a grant and aid. The grant and aid program has a deadline of March 31st, and I would recommend that the Senior Transportation Work Group look to see if there's a project that aligns with this. It's the social services type of project. It covers a lot of different areas, but I'm very keen to see also a collaboration. I would like to see this on an agenda of an intergovernmental meeting with the Cathet Regional District, so we can look at how we can work together to try to eliminate the transit desert that we do have in some way, shape, or form. And I know that there's a lot of alignment with the Cathet and the Lower Sunshine Coast, and I encourage the board to explore that.
Just one or two items in there, little things. But I didn't hear anything specifically for the delegation. I don't know if there's anything in there that you do want to speak to, Chris.
Mary and I will work on potentially scoping a project for a grant and aid, and it's worth considering that. And if Mary wants to just add something to the Partners in Change.
Yeah, thank you. I just maybe wanted to end by saying, yes, the work that we've done over the last year and that Chris talked about started with the Seniors Transportation Working Group, a small committee, subcommittee of the Seniors Planning Table. And so we aligned with a lot of different activities and campaigns, Be the Change, Vancouver Coastal Health, and we started attracting other partners to this group that were not necessarily there for seniors, but for transportation. So I think what we're saying is there needs to be a transportation committee. I would hate to see the momentum that was made last year fall, and the Seniors Transportation Working Group subcommittee of the Seniors Planning Table is, not able to keep doing this really large systems level work without, a bigger investment or more capacity. So I'm asking that we somehow figure out how can we continue this committee, which I know there was one a few years ago, but I would hate to see the momentum die. And how can we continue doing this work at that macro level?
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just wondering what you see as the next steps. Are you actually looking for transportation solutions, or are you looking to advocate for policy changes, preferably at the provincial level, where our roads are governed by the Motor Vehicle Act, which pretty much says it all? Where do you think you would go? Because our Regional Transportation Committee just became a quarterly complaint session, which was kind of fun, but didn't get us anywhere. Thanks.
I think all of the above, but mainly the person or the resource that would help to coordinate that's the piece that we're missing. That we've been doing just as a committee of volunteers. So it really requires that investment of resource.
And I think that having that person to say, what is the most efficient way forward here? Is it to do provincial level advocacy? Is it to lean into some of these more grassroots initiatives? Is it to support and scale up things like Nick Gaskin has got started? Like, it will grow, and we really have to believe in induced demand, and in some ways to create that. So I don't want to be making those decisions on behalf of a group. We need someone who can really weigh those options and say, this is going to be the best use of our time. These are the levers that we're going to lean on to start to see some change. And we really do need the support and the capacity for someone to help us make those decisions.
Thank you. I keep seeing hands going up and coming down and going back up again. And Director White, yours is currently the one that's up.
I can say.
Okay, Director Gabius.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to say thanks for bringing the stories forward. I think that's really important because we don't necessarily hear them, and for you to go out and bring them into the light, I think it's really valuable for me, just personally. Also the recommendations. I'm just looking at this document, and thank you so much for offering some ideas, offering some solutions. That's very appreciated. And I have a question, just because we're going to be talking about transit. Well, we do often, but we will soon with transit priorities. I'm wondering from what you've heard, what are the barriers for seniors when it comes to transit? Like, what are the common? What is the recurring themes?
Yeah, I think apart from places where there isn't fixed length transit, and we did hear from some people, well, they're going to increase service on the main routes while we have nothing, and I mean that's a larger conversation to be had. But we heard a lot about bus stops, not being covered, and it being dark, or not feeling safe to even get to the bus stop, or being far from a bus stop on a highway and having a walker or having a scooter or having some kind of challenges to being there, and feeling the safety issue, which I didn't see as a large issue, did really come through. And one of the largest pieces that came out of this whole research from our collaborators and from our own work was that very, very few people can project into the future 4 or 5 years and imagine themselves without a vehicle. Like, when we asked them, what would your life look like? How would you be able to move? What sort of activities could you engage in? 90% of people said they never even think about it, even though it might be 4 or 5 years or 8 years away. And so when we're in that situation where we're not able to project forward, it doesn't become a priority in our minds. But I would say that recurring themes around the safety, and then of course the connectivity, like what Director Bax is talking about, being able to come from Cathette across the ferry, get a bus, connect, and go to Vancouver. If one of those connections isn't seamless, then you're ending up 2, 3, 4 hours, and that kind of inefficiency it's not attractive to people. And so when you can deal with those, our own systems, as well as the connectivity between those different modes, that's when users really have high uptake. So.
Thank you. Director White.
Okay, I think I've collected my thoughts now, so I'm ready to go. Not being ambushed by people dropping their hands. Yeah. So I guess what I want to say is both at both tables I sit at, we're really doing a lot of work recently to
to be more efficient and really focus on our priorities. And I know, like, Town of Gibson's for sure, big strategic priority is transportation. And we are putting time into advocacy and putting time into our priorities. And when proposals come forward, we know how to respond because it's in our strategic plan. And meanwhile, SCRD's got putting a lot of resources and time into the corporate work plan, which is really setting our priorities and allocating staff time to that. But where I'm going with this is, I don't know where, like, having a new coordinator that might kind of overlap with these efforts that are going, I don't know where it fits. And I don't know if, I guess in examples in the past, I don't see that always as an automatically something that makes things more efficient. It can be the opposite when things overlap. And even more so, another committee. You know what I'm gonna, everybody knows where I'm gonna come from. But like, I completely agree with Director McMahon about the, unfortunately, how the previous transportation committee worked. It wasn't really a great use of time. It was a complaint session, and a lot of people who were there are public servants and people who could be doing a lot of work to move files forward, but instead their time is being allocated to a complaint session. So I'm a little bit concerned about, like, I guess what I'm going to ask is, are there alternatives to just say, because it's actually a classic government response. I appreciate you're coming from outside of government. It's always a classic government response. Let's just throw another committee at it. You know, that'll solve things, and it doesn't always. Let's hire another coordinator. So I just want to, I'm approaching that with a bit of skepticism from my experience, and I want to know if there are alternatives being considered to this. And I mean, I'm also interested in, I don't know if staff will want to answer this, but like, does staff have any kind of alternatives to, like, can we, if there are some strategies or there are some outcomes we're looking for here, is a committee or a new coordinator necessarily the way to go, when maybe we can achieve those outcomes through the avenues and the capacities we already have?
Great question. If I can just respond quickly, that the coordinator does not necessarily mean a committee. You know, we might be able to have one without the other to help connect with some of that existing work that's being done, just to make sure that there's some knowledge translation and knowledge sharing between that. So I would be hesitant also about another committee and expecting that, but the resource center as a whole doesn't have a mandate to necessarily do transportation work, and we've been holding a lot of these threads at the sort of grassroots organizational level, and that coordinator would really be to support us in that regard, and a bunch of these grassroots initiatives, and make sure that they're not overlapping with existing governmental committees and priorities and action plans that you have.
Thanks. And maybe if I can just tell you a little bit about what it looks like. So we applied for and got some funding for this report, or for the assessment project. So we applied for the grant, or I applied for the grant through the Seniors Transportation Working Group. Then we pulled in Chris from Be the Change to help work on the project. Then it attracted some other partners. Then Nick in Pender Harbor got the AIM grant to help with his bus, so we've collaborated with him. And then Bev Pittman from United Way got excited about the transportation, and she puts new grants opportunities. So we help apply, even though we're not now, we've kind of gone beyond our seniors initiative. Then she wants us to come and speak at a provincial summit on aging. So I go and pull in VCH, Sally McBride. So we have to coordinate and get a presentation and find someone to do that. And then we host the monthly working group committees. And then now we want to have a convening, and we have to publish a report. And all of that is what we would hope that a coordinator could do, if that makes sense. So we've really caught the eye, certainly of United Way. the federal grant that Nick in Pender Harbor is applying for to expand his bus program. He has gotten sort of interest from the federal government. So, he's asking for our support to lend to that application. So all of these little bits add up to a lot of work for someone, and it can't be me anymore. So that's kind of why we're asking. That person could continue the momentum and could maybe just continue to keep the conversations alive. VCH through Sally McBride is helping to keep some of those, PICs. The PICs grant, will pay to get people in a room. It's like, it just requires some support to keep the momentum, I guess. Does that make sense?
And just to answer very succinctly, that idea of the coordinator came out of that multi-service convening, and so in terms of alternatives, I don't know what those alternatives are at this point,
Yeah.
just to be
The alternative will
frankly.
be,
Continue to shoulder that work, with our limited capacity, so.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Director McMahon, because she hasn't had a chance yet, and then Director Bax.
Actually, I have, but I'll take it. Yeah, I understand the capacity challenge here. But I just wanted to rewind the history a little bit, because in 2011, the SCRD got together with then MOTI and other partners and did a regional transportation plan. And it went absolutely nowhere because there were no commitments from the province to action any of it. So the only way to move things forward, I think at this point, would be to get commitments in writing from the critical partners, because otherwise you just end up studying the problem again. And what we know is that we have a transportation problem. And we've documented it really, really well numerous times. But we haven't managed to find the way forward. And that's the trick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Bax, you're the last hand, and then I think we'll. move on
Yeah,
to our
my
agenda.
question is for Director White about he mentioned he has someone within his organization that does some transit coordination. And I was wondering what you said something in your previous comments that you had, that transportation was a strategic initiative, something strategically important to the town of Gibson's, and that you had someone working within that portfolio. Did you not?
Me.
Oh, you, okay, okay. I
It's
thought it might have
largely,
been.
sorry, it's largely an advocacy
Okay,
objective in our strategic plan, and where we as a council are doing advocacy to BC Transit, to Ministry of Transportation and Transit. And we've had quite a number of meetings, and actually the announcement that just came out yesterday is in part of that, like about the crossings. It's something we've been working quite relentlessly on, and we're getting some results.
that was good work, yes, absolutely. I thought that he had somebody that we could lean to try to look more regionally, but apparently that's not the case.
Okay, thank you, Director Bax. I don't see any other hands up. Last chance, Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was a little slow. I was having trouble with my little computer here, but I got her all fixed. I wanted to say thank you for all your work on behalf of the people up in Pender. That bus is well received. It's well used. I'm quite concerned about sustaining it into the future, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So thank you very much. It was great to see it. I guess I could say back again, because we did try it once before. So I'm hopeful. Thank you.
We are too. Thank you,
Yeah.
Director Lee.
Great. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, directors, moving on in our agenda. Next up, we have item 6.1, which is Committee of the Whole meeting recommendations 1 through 14 for February 13th. Before we endorse the block, directors, are there any that you want to pull for separate consideration? If not, I would look for a motion to endorse the block, please. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. All right, 6.2, Electoral Area Services Committee, recommendations 1 through 6, February 20th. Again, is there any directors that would like to pull any of these for separate consideration? If not, a motion to endorse the block. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried. All right, thank you very much. Moving right along. Next up, item 6.3, which is establishment of a budget standing committee. Corporate officer, did you want to say anything to it? Otherwise, I can take it away. Okay. So this was something that I have asked of our corporate officer and CAO. We talked about it a little bit previously as a group about, whether we really needed finance committee meetings through the year. And so the idea here is that we would be getting rid of the finance committee. We would be doing a budget meeting, a budget committee only at budget time or around budget. And then everything else throughout the year, audit, things like that, would be dispersed into the committee of the wholes. And so the recommendation that I made here would be that by default, the chair and vice chair for budget committee would be the chair and vice chair of the board. And so I've got recommendations on page 32 with the help of the corporate officer. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a question about policy, like the delegations bylaw, what has to come to the board? What is the dollar limit for items coming to the board? Does that stay with the board? Or is that in the budget realm because it impacts?
The budget committee would be looking at if you look on page 34 of our agenda package, 5-year financial planning, pre-budget planning, utility rates, capital plan reviews and updates, budget proposals, post-budget debrief. Director
Sorry,
McMahon.
let me try for a better example. I can't remember whether we have a policy on borrowing, whether we have a ceiling for how much borrowing we undertake. I know that it's been discussed before. So would that, just wondering, do you see that as falling under budget or do you see that as strictly board?
I see that as either strictly board or through the policy review committee. Because that committee is there to review board policies. This one would be just for doing the, round 1, round 2, pre-budget, utility rate setting, like those sessions. We talked about not needing them at all and just making them special committee of the wholes. But the problem is for a lot of folks following the breadcrumbs down the road, it's easy to go to a budget meeting and know that you're going to find budget documents versus trying to find something in the committee of the whole from some time ago. Director White.
I'll move the option.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? I've got seconders. Is there any other discussion of the motions on page, or the recommendations on page 32? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. All right. Director Lee.
I notice on page 33 that we have a further recommendation to appoint some people to the Budget Committee. That wasn't in the top recommendations, was it? So I'd like to make a motion that we do appoint those people to the new Budget Committee. Is that in order?
Corporate officer?
I believe that's number 2 of the recommendation, that the board chair's appointments to the newly established budget committee be affirmed.
Thank you.
Okay, good, thank you.
But glad to know that you read into the report, didn't just stop at the recommendations. So thank you, Director Lee. Director White, I see your hand up. Is that residual? Okay, sorry. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item 6.4 in the agenda. It's a request for exemption from SCRD noise bylaw number 597 for Alberg Productions. This is a fairly straightforward item, I believe. Directors, do you have any questions regarding it or recommendations to make? Director Bax.
I'm not gonna blow it high dough here. I'm gonna recommend I'm gonna put forward the recommendations as they appear on page 37.
Thank you. Have I got a seconder for them? Oh, thank you, Director Stanford. Okay, Director White, I see your hand up.
Yeah, good to see the support so far on this. I just wanted to share the experience of the town of Gibson's, which has been 100% positive with these kinds of requests. So it's been,
It's mostly there.
nev-
And it's mostly there.
Yep. And I know that we've given a number of these exemptions through the regional district as well, and I don't think we've been hearing anything negative back. I get a thumbs up, so. All right, I'm gonna call the question then. All those in favor? And that is carried. Excellent. Next up, item 6.5, solid waste management plan review and upgrade, contract amendment. And Manager Soul has just come into the meeting to join us, so we will turn it over to Manager Soul if he wishes to provide a brief introduction.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So the board may recall during the 2025 budget cycle that we had a proposal forward to do some additional work related to our long-term disposal question around getting some input from elected officials on the coast, as well as having our consultant who is developing our solid waste management plan attend those sessions and incorporate the outcomes of it into the plan. And as that budget proposal was adopted and incorporated, we have before you a proposal to amend the contract with that consultant to do that work. I'm happy to take any questions if the board has any.
Great, thank you very much. Directors, any questions and/or recommendations that might be located on page 39? Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair, and a question to you, actually, because you remember so many things. This is referring to the Solid Waste Summit? Is that the,
Manager Soul?
I see it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. I can move the recommendations on page 41.
Great, thank you very much. And I've got a seconder from Director Stanford. Any discussion on the motion? Looking for real or virtual hands. If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. And item 6.6, cardboard container hauling service, RFP 2435003 contract award. I think it speaks for itself, but yet Manager Soul is here if there's any questions from directors. And otherwise, I would look for a recommendation.
I had the wrong page when I moved. Chair, I move the recommendations on page 41, which are the recommendations that we are now looking at. So I should have moved recommendations on page 39.
Okay, simple to fix. We'll just do it over. So you're moving the recommendations on page 39,
I sure am.
which are relating to the solid waste management plan review and upgrade contract amendment. Thank you. Director Stanford, are you still seconding that? Thank you. Is there still no discussion on this? I will call the question again. All those still in favor?
We also passed the next item.
Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. All right, so on page 41, cardboard container hauling service request for proposal, contract award. Director Gabius, would you like to move that?
I might as well while I'm at it. I will move the recommendations on page 41.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations? A couple of them, so thank you very much. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion that's on the floor? This is for cardboard hauling contract on page 41, in case anybody's missed their page. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Manager Soul. All right. Moving on to item 6.7, RFP 2561302, janitorial services at aquatic facilities award report. I think the report speaks to itself. I do see Manager Van Velzen online, available to take any questions. And directors, any questions or recommendations? This is on page 43 of our agenda. Director McMahon.
This is just a curiosity question. I assume we also contract out the cleaning of the other facilities? This is just the aquatic ones? So is GAC contracted out? And I was just startled that it costs that much to clean our facilities on an annual basis. I realize pools are messy places, but still.
Thank you very much. Manager Van Velzen?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is just for the aquatic facilities. The arenas are cleaned by the CRD staff.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Directors, any other questions or recommendations to be made to anybody? Director Gabius, since you're so good at making recommendations. It's on page 43.
Okay, I will move the recommendations on page 43.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? And I've got seconders for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, Manager Van Velzen. All right, moving on to Fare Free Transit for Youth, S-Pass program update, item 6.8, starting on page 45. Look over to our GM of available to take any questions? Okay. This is here for information. Director Bax.
Yeah, not a question. I really like this report, and it shows the success of the program, and I'm really grateful to staff for bringing it forward, and I'm really happy that the money that we've set aside to cover this is not being asked to be increased, but we see if almost six times the amount of people using transit. Well, not, but anyway, it's a great success. Great success.
Thank you very much. As the parent of a youth who was not a transit user before this program came along and is now the proud owner of their S-Pass, and they use it quite regularly, it's clearly having the intended effect of getting more youth onto our transit system. The one question I did have, which is based on some feedback I'd actually heard from my kid, was the regional district, they did the activation of the passes sort of where the youth were as a one-off event. Was it just sort of intended that was the only time, or is there a plan to go back to the schools again or anything like that for a further activation?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So the activations have been ongoing, and anytime that our rec facilities are open, youth are welcome to go there and they can attain a S-Pass. It takes about 2 minutes. They just have to take their ID. And in fact, when we had the initial activation, we were only at about 300 passes. We are now over 700. So it is a continual uptake that's occurring throughout the year. Thank you.
That's great news. Thank you. Director Stanford.
Thank you. First a comment and then a quick question. I also been amazed at the change in how youth are taking on public transit. It's just now a matter of course, and as a transit user, I really have to commend the bus drivers because they are taking the time to explain the importance of the S-Pass to all the students that come on. And my question really is, how are the bus drivers taking this? Is it an issue? Has there been any concerns? How is it working for them as they move along their routes?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe we've had any complaints or any concerns raised by our drivers. It's a education, an ongoing education. Certainly, there are still youth boarding the bus without the S-Pass, and so that's what we're trying to do through our drivers is, right at the moment say, hey, go get your S-Pass, because the importance of it is, of course, in tracking. Without it, we don't have that information on who's getting on our buses. I think what will really become interesting as time moves on is we might have handed out out over 700 passes, but that's not an indicator of who's riding and how often they're riding. And so we will start to get those statistics as the year goes by in terms of what does that mean from ridership, and, being able to even drill that down into what routes at what time. So it will really be good information for informing future expansion priorities. And we do know that as ridership increases, there may become pressure points, not just necessarily on a particular route, but maybe more on a particular time. So you start to hit things like overloads and pass-ups. That will become potentially evident over time that, again, will impact your future transit expansion priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, and the advantage of tracking youth is that we can then assume that the vast majority of the other concession fares are seniors. So we're also able to track the seniors' usage and what routes and what times. The program's only been running a few months now. When do we think we will have some preliminary statistics that we can look at with some degree of confidence?
Thank you for the question. So this will be a KPI that is reported on in the quarterly reports. However, we don't get the information in a timely fashion from BC Transit. I don't mean that in a negative, but it takes time. So we will actually be a quarter behind in our reporting. So you won't see information on this until Q2 of 2025. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Inkster.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of observations of a really good program. What I've noticed is the youth still don't have the passes, but they are informed in most cases that they need to get their pass, unless it's the cases where they've told them 5 times. But those are teenagers. So it makes you wonder whether we could have implemented the program earlier and just not worried about the tracking, because the passes are still being worn and there's a slow uptake, but all the youth are still moving on the bus, i.e. we're still picking them up and moving them because it's a good idea to put the youth on buses and have them. The other thing I'm noticing is, like I said, in the trips I've been on, is the buses seem fuller than they were in the past, and it's a lot of youth on the buses. So they're using our program that we approved. Another good kudo for us. But also what I'm noticing is short trips. So the youth are using it for short trips, which before they may not have said, I'm not going to spend $2 or $3 to go 10 blocks or from Seashell to Davis Bay or from Davis Bay to Roberts Creek. But now they're doing that because it's free. So it's a good way to move around the youth. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Director Gabius.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'll say it again. I have also anecdotally noticed the uptick in youth riding the bus to Half Moon Bay. I take it a couple times a day, and there's been more and more. And being able to, working with students, I've been able to ask them if they ride it more now, and they've said yes. And so I'm wondering if the data that will be coming to us through reports, if that will be the only measure of success, or if there's going to be some surveys sent to students, or is there something that we would like to see? Or so maybe kind of question to staff: is there another way to measure the success of this program than data that's in the works, or is it solely the data that we'll be looking at?
Thank you for the question. So if the board will remember back in terms of the budget request and the deliberations around the execution of the S-Pass, the only thing that was deliberated was the impact on fare. And so there were no staff resources put aside. So our execution of this program has been humble in nature, just trying to be as effective and efficient as possible, working with the schools to communicate in general. But we did not have an intent to go and survey. So we are just looking at sort of the annual uptake of it. Is it increasing as a measure of success? Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I'm just going to suggest that since this was a youth initiative from the beginning, perhaps the youth would be the ones that could take on the survey if they had the interest through the schools in doing that work and continuing their advocacy for the continuation of the program.
Perhaps that's something that can be communicated back through the leadership groups and the youth counselor. And Director White, I saw your hand.
Thanks for seeing that non-virtual hand. I think probably the best person to talk to would be Anna Latanzi, who helped the youth do the survey before, and she, I mean, those, as we know, those leaders, youth leaders, have moved on, but maybe she can reach out to some others to help her. But she was really a key coordinator in that, and she's in touch with staff, so I think they know how to find her.
Great. Thank you for that. I don't see any other hands up. Thank you for that. Thank you for the information. Good news story that we definitely should do more to celebrate and recognize. With that, we're going to move on to item 7.1, which is communications. Letter back from the Ministry of Transportation and Transit, February 18th, thanking us for our letter and reminding us that we're welcome to speak to the operations staff as and when we need to. Directors, I don't think there's anything for us to do with that unless anybody has anything they want to say. And if not, we will move on to item number 8, which is the notice of motion from Director Gabius. So we're not debating it or what have you. It's being read into the record and it'll come back to the next board meeting. Thank you. Sorry, it's under new business. I wrote it under motions. My bad. So we're going to move on to bylaws, item 9.1, which is the West House Sound Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 640.6 2024. This is for adoption. Electoral area directors. Do I have a mover for adoption? Moved. Seconded. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Item 9.2, Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Bylaw Amendment Bylaw number 722.10, 2024. Also for adoption. Director Stamford moving it, seconded by Director McMahon. Any other discussion? All those in favor, electoral area directors? That is carried. Okay. Now we're going to go to directors' reports. And we'll make it easy. We'll start with Area A up at that end of the table. And if you don't have anything to report, that's okay, because we still have some business to get through. So,
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short. I'd just like to report that on Saturday, February 22nd, I attended at the Longhouse Foundation Agreement Celebration, and I want to say it was very well done. And I really enjoyed the lunch. But it was quite fun meeting all of the past chiefs, which I knew pretty well, all of them. So it was good. And that's it. Thank you.
thank you, Director Lee. Director White is passing, so I will go straight to Director Inkster.
Thanks. Good event at the Longhouse.
Thank you, Director Inkster. Short and succinct. Director McMahon.
Yeah, that was short and succinct. Monday was the meeting of the Regional Accessibility Advisory Committee, hosted this time by Seashelt. The consultants are moving forward with an accessibility report. They're setting up a working group meeting for that right now. And I think a lot of members of the committee are quite anxious to move the project forward because there's been quite a few meetings and not, it hasn't felt like there's been a lot of progress, although I think work has been done. So that's in progress. I chaired a public hearing on Tuesday, which was, I think we're finished in about 12 minutes. So that went very smoothly. I was interviewed yesterday by the BC Public Library Trustee Association about the role of elected representatives on library boards. And that was a really interesting interview. I think I got as much information as they did. But it raised some interesting thoughts with me that I will be following up on. Upcoming tomorrow is the virtual session on legislative reform, which I hope all my colleagues will be attending. We have our quarterly meeting with Ministry of Transportation and Transit coming up. I can see the agenda is getting very long. Director Gabias and myself are attending High Ground Conference. She's going on the Friday, I'm going on the Saturday. And of course, many of us are going to the Local Government Leadership Academy conference the next week. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Director Gabias?
Thank you. I will send a written report because I really want to highlight the VICL meeting, so Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Climate Leadership Steering Committee meeting that happened last week. We had Dr. Abernethy from Island Health coming to present and wanting to collaborate more with regional districts on climate action, which was really wonderful and excellent presentation and discussion. And we also talked about what we want to do this year and what our goals are and how, what the purpose of the group is. And I think we're really, really excited for this year. And there will be a panel, which I will be on as co-chair of VICL at AVIC. So I invite everybody to come to that session. So I will send a written report, especially on the presentation by Island Health, which was really interesting. And so thank you, Director McMahon, for speaking to the Accessibility Committee meeting that happened a couple days ago. And the work is happening. It's moving forward, and it's very excited. All the committee members are really, the participation is really robust, and I'm really looking forward to the work they're going to do with the consultant. Library board meeting happened yesterday, and of course talked about the earthquake that happened and the importance of emergency preparedness. And I will report a few more things by email as well. And other than that, yesterday was Living with Fire from Islands Trust, and I'm sure Director Stanford will speak to it, which was really, really interesting. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. With that, let's go to Director Stanford.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to highlight that the Sunshine Coast Chamber, we're speaking to the importance of having youth employed and youth programs employed. So it's a challenge to all businesses and services on the coast to look for opportunities for high school kids and young people to apprentice into programs. So I'm not sure how we have that kind of opportunity in the regional district, but I would like to see any opportunity whatsoever to be able to see youth employed and begin their careers on the coast and see where they can go. So that was the primary thing that came out of the chamber meeting. Just briefly on the earthquake, the comments that I got back from my community was not so much, yes, we need to be prepared, because they know that, but they didn't know what it was. And I think it's not so much for the regional district, but to make sure those emergency alerts are clear, because there were people that went 20 minutes without really understanding what was happening, and some people panicking maybe unnecessarily, but still we're in uncertain times and they weren't sure what was going on. So we need to be really consistent with those alerts from other levels of government, that they come fast and informative. Yes, Islands Trust had its Living with Fire. I managed to get the last half in. I'm looking forward to the streaming version. But it really was a more nuanced view of how we work with fire. And that's really what it is. It's living with fire and not trying to manage it like we have over the past 100 years and by snuffing it out in all cases. And having First Nations representation in the panel really gave you a more nuanced view of how we can work through this. I'm hoping there was a house sound focus, because that was the intent of that, but I didn't manage to see the first part. So it will be available for streaming if anybody else wants to see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Back.
I did see the first hour of the presentation, and there was some discussion about the islands. Definitely, it was focused on it was focused on fire smart principles, of which we have a robust organization within the SCRD on fire smart. It talked about historical prescribed burns by First Nations in maintaining the underbrush, and it was quite interesting. And so, but before that, I was vice chair for the public hearing, which was quick and painless. Absolutely. On Monday, I attended the Thriving Communities Council, which is a poverty reduction group. I'm going to be sharing the minutes from that when I receive them with the rest of the directors, as well as my monthly newsletter will go out to all of you, and I talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about what's coming up on Sunday, March 9th at the Roberts Creek Community Hall between 3 and 5. There's a grassroots event that's being created by the Waysome Roberts Creek Community Association and the OCPC for Roberts Creek, and it's called Preparation for Disaster, Forest Fire Earthquake Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Workshop, designed to help neighbors prepare for and respond to wildfire, flood, and earthquakes. And it's going to be, we're going to be working on creating neighborhood groups with neighborhood leaders that are going to create muster points and go door to door and to create a neighborhood. I'm volunteering to lead my neighborhood. There's about 30 houses, I imagine, that I'm going to be knocking on their door and getting information about them. And so that's coming up, and that's open to everyone, but it is Roberts Creek centric, kind of, but it is, I think it's something that if you have the time on Sunday, March 9th to get to it, it could be very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bax. I actually wanted to touch on, okay, so first of all, if the directors didn't know that legislative reform session, you do have to register in advance. You get the response back immediately, so it only takes a couple seconds. The earthquake alerts. I've heard some feedback from people who didn't receive them as well, and I know they're a federal and provincial alerting system, and I think like that system is able to do so much for our communities. The idea is we're supposed to be getting those alerts before we start feeling the shaking. And that system was only brought online in the summer of last year. And so like they need time to work out the bugs and figure out why people aren't getting the alerts or why they're delayed but from a technology perspective, that's fantastic what we can do that we couldn't do 5 years ago even. And the fact that this is available as an early warning system for our residents and for our communities. Emergency preparedness, I appreciate that Roberts Creek is going first with their sort of event here of what goes on in our communities. I'm going to speak to it a little bit. The Seashelt Community Association Forum, SCAF, during Emergency Preparedness Week in May, will be hosting a session at the Senior Center on May 10th. And so they're trying to get like emergency kits available for purchase and for free for those who are low income and can't afford them. They're looking to get vendors out. They want to have Fire Smart out. They want to have, our emergency program here participate. They want to go all out. They're looking to have like 1,000 of these kits available for purchase. So they want it to be a big event. So I wanted to highlight that because I forwarded the information to Director Stanford, but Director Bax, you should connect with SCAF as well to see, because they might be interested in sort of helping to teach your community what they've already been figuring out, because they've been working on like the neighborhood pods and the communication systems and stuff like that. So there is absolutely a path there. And with that, I covered off my emergency preparedness thing I wanted to mention. Longhouse ceremony was great to attend. I'm always humbled to hear Lahewus speak. I appreciate that we all come at this from different places and different levels of knowledge. So we're still learning. We're still learning what the foundation agreement means. for us as a government, for us as individuals, for us as representatives of our area. One thing that I did get the opportunity to do since we had both the MLA and the MP in the room is Director Gabius and I took them aside to have a conversation about a united response to tariffs, and what, Team Canada is going to be doing with that. And with that, I'm going to end my report and turn it over to Director Gabius for our new business.
Fantastic segue. So, do I just read it? Floor's, okay, well, apologies, it's going to be a minute or two. Okay. Whereas the President of the United States has threatened to impose unilateral 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the U.S. and further punitive tariffs in the event of any Canadian retaliation, and whereas these tariffs are anticipated to destabilize the North American trading bloc and Canadian economy, including the Sunshine Coast economy, and whereas the Prime Minister of Canada has announced that the federal government's response to any U.S. tariffs are phased and targeted retaliatory tariffs, and a consumer call to action urging Canadians to choose Canada. And whereas provincial, territorial, municipal, regional, and First Nations governments from coast to coast should be united in a collective Team Canada approach to respond to U.S. economic threats and aggression, and whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has stated that, quote, municipalities are central in Team Canada's response to today's economic challenges and the impact that a trade war with the U.S. would have on our communities, end quote. Therefore, be it resolved that the board affirms and signals the Sunshine Coast Regional District's support of the Team Canada approach, which seeks to align local, provincial, and national priorities to counter foreign policies designed to harm the Canadian economy, and that the board directs staff to conduct a high-level environmental scan that identifies potential impacts of tariffs on the organization and report back as soon as possible with their findings and with immediate and long-term strategies that would support the Team Canada approach, and that the board chair and vice chair be authorized to reach out to the District of Sechelt, the Town of Gibsons, the Sechelt Nation Government District, SD46, Sunshine Coast Tourism, Sechelt Downtown Business Association, and Sunshine Coast Chamber of Commerce, the MLA, and the MP to set up a meeting to explore opportunities for collaboration, including initiating and promoting a new targeted buy local / buy Canadian campaign in response to tariffs, and further that the board chair and vice chair report back to the board on the discussions resulting from this meeting.
Thank you, Director Gabius. So the intention is not for us to vote on, to debate it and vote on it today. It is to introduce it. It will be coming back to us at the next board meeting for full-on debate and discussion. So, Director White, was it urgent, or did you want to hold it until the
Well,
next?
it's an urgent motion, so I was going to say maybe we should vote on it today, but then, I mean, the second part, yeah, but I just have a question about it, so we can get informed while we think about it. The part at the end about asking staff to do a lot and organize meetings and things, is that?
No, it
Okay,
would be the
okay.
chair and vice chair.
Okay,
We're
because I
arranging
thought
that
it
meeting.
mentioned the chair and the vice chair as later as kind of an object rather than a
There is a
subject.
request for staff to do sort of a high-level environmental scan of
Right.
the impact to the organization.
Okay.
And the intention is not that we would be getting even necessarily a 10-page report back on it. We just sort of want to know at a high level what the impact to infrastructure, to transit, to fire services, like just a really high level of what the impacts these tariffs might have to the organization.
But the part about outreach to Sunshine Coast Tourism and the school district and all this, that's something that our elected will do.
That's on
Excellent.
us,
Yeah,
yeah.
I wanted to clarify that. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, okay, that will, that'll come back at the next board meeting. Yes, we did have some discussion about whether it was something we wanted to try and get onto the agenda for debate and voting today. But timelines didn't quite work out to get it published, and the tariffs have been kicked down the road again. So we've got a couple weeks of breathing room to discuss it properly. So with that, I would look for a motion to go in camera, that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 90(1)(a) of the community charter. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? That motion is carried. Are there any questions from the gallery. We have nobody here, but we do have Connie online. Connie, I've given you permission to unmute yourself. I don't think we have any questions. And so with that, we're just going to take a couple minutes to reset the room and we'll go in camera. And welcome back to the regular scheduled board meeting for February 27th, 2025. It's 2:36. We've concluded our agenda. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next one.